بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين دمان ولا لها إنك داونيا تلفزيونka weyn ee Kalsan waxaan ku soo dhaweynaynaa barnaamijkeeni toddobaad laha ah ee Gurmad sida tooska uga baxa telefishinkan Kalsan barnaamijkan cawada waxa uu ka kooban yahay laba qaybood qaybta hore aan jecelnahay in aan idinku soo gudbino nin isagu qaali ah oo marti inoogu ah oo la yiraahdo Dr. Green Thompson. Dr. Green Thompson waa nin Muslim ah oo ku takhasusay cudurrada maskaxda gala amba dhimirka. Thompson wuxuu ka tirsan yahay Cambridge. waxaana uu cawada ka hadli doonaa depressionka. waxaan jeclahay in aan ku weydiiyo su'aalaha khuseeya xanuunkan luqada Ingiriisiga marka walaalaha waxaan ka qayb qaadanaynaa si degan inay u dhageystaan kana faa'iideystaan. First of all, I have to welcome you to Gurmad program of Kalsan TV. It is great privilege to have a psychiatrist of Muslim background to appear on one of our shows and to discuss and talk about one of the most difficult things people go through, which is depression, which is a form of mental illness. Doctor, I would like to warmly welcome you to the television, and first I would like to ask you to talk about a little bit about your historical background, your personal matters before you go into the topic. Please welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So as you're aware, I work as a psychiatrist in Cambridge, and depression is the malady in terms of mental health that affects the greatest number of people. In terms of my personal background, I was born and brought up in South Africa, where I read medicine. But I specialized in psychiatry in London on the Charing Cross scheme and then in Cambridge. And I remained in Cambridge ever since. Now, depression is something which doesn't protect you regardless of whether you're rich or poor, whether you're old or young, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim. And certainly it is something that is becoming more of a problem in the Muslim community. As a Muslim, we know that we begin not only reading the Quran, but we begin always by seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is important, and we always ask God for help. God asks us, however, to have good intentions and to do the best that we can do in terms of the guidance He has given us, and then to trust in Him. But sometimes within the Muslim community, people become a bit confused, and they say that they're trusting in Allah without doing the right thing. And so I know you will have seen recently that there are some people who are taking their loved ones to Somaliland to be tied up against a wall.
Definitely.
Because they're not sure as to what's going on. And I think that
you're talking about the Channel 4 program.
Yes, and there was a report. So what we're hoping tonight is to try and educate people.
Yes.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He is the light, but we also know that we're supposed to seek knowledge that benefits. And hopefully this knowledge will cast a light on the ignorance that surrounds it, so that it will be less frightening to people and they won't do the wrong things even with the right intentions.
Well, definitely. Thank you very much. I think depression is a common mental disorder that causes people to experience depressive mood, loss of interest and happiness, feelings of guilty, low self-esteem. I think disturbed sleep, appetite, low energy, poor concentration. Person suffering from depression experiences intense emotions. Is there any thing we can say these are the things that cause this mental illness? Is there anything that we can say these are the sources of this is where the disease originates from, or we do not know the origins?
I mean, that's certainly important. But I think before we discuss or we ask ourselves, where does it come from, we should first understand what it is.
Yes.
And we should understand that, you know, both from a scientific basis and more deeply than that, in terms of our faith. And as we have always said, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, prayed for an increase in knowledge which was beneficial. Now, in terms of what it is, if you were to go and see your GP or a psychiatrist, they may tell you that what you're suffering from is not uncommon, and that is true. We know that the World Health Organization ranks depression in terms of the burden of the disease as in the top 3 internationally. And in North America, it is closing in on number 1.
Yeah.
We know that people suffer from low mood, obviously. We know that people can suffer from a disturbance of their sleep, either sleeping too much or too little, of their appetite, eating too much or too little, of the concentration, poor concentration, not enjoying things that they normally enjoy, and struggling at work or struggling at home. So we know these are all important things that a doctor looks at when diagnosing depression. But one of the most important aspects, and one of the most severe aspects, and one of the aspects which leads to suicidal thoughts, and for some people to actually killing themselves, is loss of hope or despair. And that is the deepest level. Now, as Muslims, we understand the danger of despair, and we also understand the solutions for despair.
I think a lot of people, I think this condition can affect anyone, regardless of his status, belief. It can affect rich and poor. There are many famous people who are battling against this. I think you said somebody must realize that there is a reason for this. Allah has made somebody to suffer in this way, and there is a wisdom behind it. Is that right? And we shouldn't be feeling guilty. We shouldn't be having thoughts of suicidal thoughts that many people do. We shouldn't be ending our lives because of the problems that we face.
Absolutely. I mean, I would never encourage people to be complacent. I wouldn't want people to think that, well, I have depression, this is my lot in life, there's nothing I can do, I can just continue. But on the other hand, we should also not blame people. Because when we are blaming people for being depressed, we are doing them a disservice, and as a Muslim, we are doing them wrong. We're not going to do anything to help them. Yeah. So we understand that this is a test, and somebody might say that perhaps it is a punishment. And even if somebody had done wrong, and even if this was a punishment, one still needs to look at what the Quran, what Allah has guided us to do to come out of it. And we look at things very clearly. It is Allah who gives laughter and tears, from Surah Najm, the star. So we know that tests come from Him. But if you are tested with low mood, if you are tested with this difficulty, what should you do? Now, we know that actually the beauty of the guidance that we have tells us what to do in all circumstances of life, whether we have good days or bad days. If you've got good days, you should have shukr, you should be humble and grateful. And that will remind your inner self that this goodness that came to you wasn't just due to you alone, that this was a gift from above as well. Yeah. If you have a bad day, then you try and have sabr. You try to keep going, to persevere, and to be patient. Again, you're telling your inner self that this difficulty is not simply due to what you have done, but this is a test for you. Now, if you go to a psychiatrist, if you go to a psychologist, if you go to a GP, they'll tell somebody who's very depressed to put structure into their life, to have a sheet of paper where they look at what they're doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, to get out of bed every day, have a shower, put on clean clothes, brush their hair, try and get out of the house, try and do charitable deeds, because we know that altruism, being charitable, is a very good coping mechanism. Now, as Muslims, we already have this guidance. Yeah. We know we're supposed to have structure in our day to pray our salah. We know we should be charitable to others, even if it's just smiling at your neighbor. And we know that we should try and keep going even in the face of difficulty. So, as a Muslim, if you are afflicted by depression, if you look at yourself, try and do an audit of the things you're already doing. Look at the things you are doing. Ask yourself, what am I doing in a good way that is a good thing to do? What am I doing which is a good thing to do, but I'm not doing it in the right way? And what am I doing in a practiced way whenever I get depressed that is not good for me? Then you can understand what to make close to you, what to strengthen, and what to let alone. So some people might be friendly towards their family, even in difficult times, trying to be a good person, and that's good for them. Somebody else, as I always say, could be, lashing out, kicking the dog, hitting their wife, or drinking alcohol, and that obviously is a bad coping mechanism.
And it makes things worse.
Absolutely. But these are all coping mechanisms. So understand that you are doing this because you're in pain. Understand that you're doing this because you're in distress. But understand that this is something which, as you say, is not good for you.
Okay, that's right. I think, and I think you mentioned one thing, which is from the religious perspective, worth saying it again and again, which is this is test from Allah.
Yes.
And once it is test, you need to pass the test with wisdom and patience. I think, what do you advise to individuals? There are a large number of people who are suffering from depression in various forms and shapes, and they just reliant on something prescribed to them by their GPs. What is your advice?
As I said at the beginning, we should always be happy to pray and ask for an increase in knowledge which is of benefit to us. And it may be that the medication has benefit and that the talking therapy has benefit. And if we enter that having asked our Creator first to help us, then we can ask Him to make whatever we are doing, if we're doing it in the right way and with the good intentions, to be a means of His mercy on us, whether that's talking therapy or medication. But before we get to that, let's ask ourselves, what are we actually doing in terms of coping? Because often today, it will be that the reason the person is depressed might be because of something that's happened. They've lost a loved one, they've lost money, their business has failed, they've migrated to the UK and it's very difficult, they're a single mother. There are many difficulties that are going on in their life. Now, whatever these events are, whatever these outcomes are, you're not in control of them. And I say to all of my patients, whether they have faith or they don't have faith, that focus on the things that you can reasonably be held accountable for. Focus on your intentions in your heart. Focus on the actions you can do and do the best actions you can do. But after that, leave the outcomes to themselves. If you believe in God, then leave the outcomes to the Creator of the sun and the moon, of the Creator of the universe. If you don't believe in God, at least realize that you are not able to control whether somebody loves you or not. You are not able to control whether the rain falls tomorrow or not. So focus on your intentions, focus on your actions, leave the outcomes to themselves, and in that way, whether it's a good day or a bad day, you will be doing the same thing. On a good day, you will have gratitude and humbleness, and on a difficult day, you will have perseverance and patience. But you will always be focusing on having good intentions, doing the best you can do, and leaving the outcomes to themselves. That way, events that are happening around you, whether your parents are treating you well or badly, whether you're rich or you're poor, these external things won't be able to reach inside you and manipulate you as easily as they have so far.
Okay, Dr. Green Thompson, means a lot of people are depressed, yes. And I think they are depressed as a result of what went wrong in their lives. You mentioned that somebody must have lost his loved ones. Somebody must have lost, like Somalis, they have lost a whole beautiful country through civil war. Yeah. Everything that our country has built in the last 30 years have gone in few years of wars between different groups. I think, are we not saying that as Somalis we are suffering from national depression that affects every single one?
Well, let's look back through history. Let's look at the example of the Sahaba, of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad. But let's even look further than that. If we look at the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Peace be upon him.
Some of them, as Somalis, have fled a war-torn country to come to migrate to Europe and elsewhere. Some of those Muslims around the Prophet Muhammad made migration to Habasha, to what people call Ethiopia today. And that was a very difficult time for them. Some of them later, some of the same ones made double hijrah, migrated to Medina. And those who in Medina were afflicted by a fever at first, and many of them were unwell. And they were pining over leaving Makkah. They didn't know whether they'd ever go back to Makkah. They didn't know whether they'd ever see it again, and many of their compatriots had been killed. So they suffered as well, and they were doing migration for the highest reason, just for the sake of God. And even they suffered. So suffering and migration is not unusual. You say that Somalia has been destroyed, and we know that this whole world is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are not in charge of what happens to it. But the important thing is that we try and do our best. The question is not simply what has happened, but what do we do now? Do we just sit back and say we give up, there's no hope, we're in despair? Did we love the dunya so much that if Somalia is destroyed, we will not want to taste sweetness in life? That is no good for us.
And And that also applies to individual problems. If you have lost your loved ones, if you have lost an amount of wealth, if you have had being rejected by your husband or wife, then you should be preparing to go through difficult time, and you shouldn't be giving up the hope. That's the message.
Yeah, and I said let's go back even further than the Prophet Muhammad. If we look at the Prophet Jacob and his son Joseph, Yusuf alayhi salam. Now Jacob lost his son Joseph when he was a very young boy. We all know that story. People who are Muslim, people who are Jews, people who are Christians know that story. But he always had hope that this young son who had told him of his dream of the stars and the moon and the sun bowing down to him, that the son was not really dead. And he had patience. He had sabr. Now, Jacob, many, many years later, when Benjamin was lost during the famine, if you remember, the remaining brothers went to Egypt because there was a famine. Joseph was in a very high state in Egypt. He was in charge of the food. He kept Benjamin back through putting something into his luggage, and the rest of the brothers went back. Jacob cried when they came back over Joseph, and they said, "You are never going to forget about him." And he said, "I know what you do not." And he told them to go and look for Joseph and his brother. And he said to them, "Nobody loses hope of the mercy of Allah except for those who don't believe." So that's a reminder to us, not that despair is a bad thing. Of course it's a bad thing. But it's a reminder to us that despair is not true. That it is always the case that Allah could give you a solution from a direction you do not see, either in this world, or your difficulty could be a source of goodness to you on the hereafter. So there is never a real reason to lose hope. And as a believer, you know that despair is false. And if you fall into despair, it's not that you call yourself bad names or that you remonstrate with yourself. It's that let it be a red flag that reminds you that this feeling, even though it is so painful, is happily not a true feeling. There's always reason for hope, even in the darkest moments.
Well, that's good. So I think it is, we have to look beyond the medicine is given to the individual by his doctor or GB. We should also look for solutions in our deen. And I think one of the things that has been repeatedly said, as-salatu ilaj al-ghalaq, means the prayers are cure to anxiety. So I think the connection of, as a Muslim psychiatrist, a person who sees depressed and mentally ill brothers and sisters and other individuals who are from non-Muslim background, how do you advise your patients just to turn to God as well?
Well, the truth is the truth. Whether the person is somebody who believes in God or whether they're somebody who doesn't believe in God, it is always the case that it is better for them to focus on their intentions and their actions and not let what is happening or not happening distress them and manipulate their feelings. That is always the case for them. It is always the case that they should have perseverance and patience in adversity. It is always the case that they should have humility and gratitude in times of goodness. That is a goodness for you always. That is a true guidance that is given by God to his prophets through time, to Muhammad, to Moses before him, to Jesus, to Noah, to Abraham, to all of the true prophets. But even if one doesn't believe in God, these concepts are so self-evident that the logic of them is compelling. And so I can share that advice with anyone. If someone believes in God, obviously you can take things further by encouraging them to leave the outcomes of God, but doing the best they can, not being complacent, not just sitting back, and to have good intentions, and to be doing the things that they're doing, the charity, the praying 5 times a day, not simply as a means to cure their depression, but as a means of worship. And that will be better for them that they're doing it for an even higher reason. Now, remember that you spoke about anxiety for a second, and as we discussed, that's a whole other issue on its own. But just a quick reminder of the words of Musa alayhi salam when he was given the task by Allah to go to meet Pharaoh. Now, Pharaoh is probably a scarier character than most of us will have to face. And Musa alayhi salam, Moses, is definitely a better person than any one of us are. But even in that case, Allah told Musa alayhi salam to go and speak to Pharaoh mildly, and Moses, Musa alayhi salam, he said to Allah, Rabbi shakli sadri wa yassir li am. He asked Allah to open his chest and make easy his task. Because a big task or a big difficulty can make you feel as if there's a heavy rock pressing upon you.
Definitely.
And so you were asking Allah to open your chest and to make your task easy for you. And then, of course, to loosen your tongue and let them understand what you are saying. So there are many examples in the Quran of prophets, the best people who've ever walked this earth, who've had bigger tests than we have had, and who have always sought help directly from their Creator. But it also shows us the way in which they went about their action. So it's not just about repeating a prayer 25,000 times and believing that that prayer is going to cure you on its own. You worship the Creator and you make dua directly to Him. And the examples of the prayers that were made by individual prophets can be examples of prayers that we can make directly to our Creator. But there are practical ways to go forward. There are practical ways to interact with our families. There are practical advice on how to treat our colleagues, how to treat our employees, how to be honest with money. So religion is a very simple word in English, but deen is a heavy word. This is a way of life. This is a way in which you should be looking not simply as to what you're doing to cure your low mood, but how you are treating others, how you are treating your parents, whether you're honest when you play football, whether you are trying to work as hard as you can at school. And if you try and improve all areas of your life, you have no idea where Allah might come closer to you and help you in a different way. So take a step towards your Creator in terms of doing goodness in any part of your life, even a part unrelated to your low mood, and ask Him to make this trial easy for you.
I think Dr. Green Thompson, are there any different forms of depression?
Yes.
Can you throw some light on these?
Okay. Well, if we look at somebody who has, let's say, more than one depressive episode and has a recurrent depressive disorder, that is real, and that can be mild, moderate, or severe. If it is severe, the person may or may not even have some features which the doctor says are psychotic features, and that's a very scary word. But it may simply be that they are so depressed that they believe that their limbs are falling off, they're rotten. They may believe that they are not worthy of breathing the oxygen in the air. They may believe that they're that they are worthless, but they believe it. That is the
severe forms of the depression.
You also get, for example, women who have a baby, and a week after they have a baby, or a few days after the baby, they fall into a very deep depression. Even women who've never had a history of any mental illness in their life. Now that can be a dangerous time for them, because if your daughter is having a child, her husband, her mother, her father, you, her father, her friends, everybody's expecting her to be happy. They're expecting her to love her baby.
There could be possibility of antenatal depression.
Postnatal depression.
Postnatal depression.
After the delivery. And because everybody's expecting her to be happy, even though she's surrounded by family, she may feel very alone because she doesn't feel confident enough to speak up to her family to say, I don't want to look at this child. I'm not interested in feeding this child. I just want to go and sleep in a dark corner of the room.
And not to cut you off, Minister, is that a condition that can develop?
Yes, postnatal depression is very real, and it's very dangerous, and it is very frightening.
Do we understand, do the doctors highlight that the person who just gave birth of a baby has this condition, or it is something building up without the knowledge of anyone?
Sometimes it can present, when it presents for the first time, it can present without a lot of warning, and it can present in somebody who's had no history of depression, who doesn't have a family history of depression. So it can happen, very quickly. Obviously, if somebody has a history of depression, you might be prepared for it, but if they don't, it can be very scary. You also have bipolar depression, where the person doesn't only have a history of episodes of low mood, but at some time they also have episodes of mania, which may be agitated behavior, not sleeping, being disinhibited, maybe appearing to be acting inappropriately, perhaps thinking they can fly, perhaps acting in a very grandiose manner, and this is also a mood disorder.
And is it the reason that people having perception that they can fly when humans actually cannot? Is that the reason why many people throw themselves from buildings and mountains?
Obviously, if somebody thinks they can fly and they test it out, they're going to come to a difficult end. But obviously, many people who throw themselves off buildings are throwing themselves off buildings not because they are manic and think that they can fly, but they're throwing themselves off buildings because they're depressed and they want to kill themselves. But again, the key problem there is despair. Now, as a Muslim, as I said, we understand despair. We remember from Yaqub alayhi salam, Jacob's words, that despair is a false belief. But you can't just give that advice to somebody in a very cold way. You have to be there for them. But if we remind ourselves of this in the good times, then hopefully in the bad times this message will come through. Also, as I said earlier, is that if you don't remind yourself of God's grace in the good times, if you're not grateful to your Creator when He gives you something good, if you say, this is something I did on my own, then you risk becoming depressed in the bad days, because your subconscious tells you when something difficult happens to you, this is your fault. And then there's nobody to help you then.
Thank you very much. So I just would like to say that we can get from this lesson, that this lecture, that it is a mental form of mental illness. It can be dealt with. There are variations within this illness. It can be mild, it can be severe. The severe form is very difficult to deal with, but your overall advice as a Muslim psychiatrist is the individual to link with his Creator, to believe that there is a purpose behind this. And the more that happens, the more chances we have, the less chances we have for the disease to get worse.
Absolutely, but we should be connected to our Creator not simply in times of difficulty, but also in times of goodness. So we should be, trying to connect ourselves to our Creator when everything is going well, to be very grateful, and that hope that in the difficult time God remembers us as well. And it is always the case that one should want to step closer to our Creator, and it is always the case that one should want to do what is best. And with regard to going to your GP in the NHS and going to see your psychiatrist, as I said, make a dua, pray for an increase in knowledge that is beneficial to you. Ask that that which is useful and good for you comes to you, and anything that is harmful is kept away from you. And then do your best, and as I said, do an audit of what you're doing, trying to improve your prayer, your charity, and everything else. And if you feel you need help, go and see your GP, go and see a psychiatrist, get talking therapy, which may just help you to make sense of the things that you're already doing to cope, and to help you to understand your own coping mechanisms better. And if that serves as good advice to you, then that is good for you. If you need medication temporarily, maybe that will be a source of goodness to you. But always give thanks in terms of the goodness that you get to your Creator, and always realize that any harm that comes to you, or any difficulty that stays with you, is only with His permission. And so ask Him to make it easy for you, ask Him to make it a source of your sins to be washed away from you, and ask Him to let you die as a Muslim.
I think we are coming to the end of the program, but what I wanted to say is that it's hugely beneficial, and I love to have you on a regular basis in our talk shows, live with the just the rest of the world. This is a widely viewed television, and I think your programs would be seen live in many areas. What I would like to also say that a lot of people have asked me if they could have the opportunity for you to appear in their towns, and one of the requests came from Leicester City. There are also a group of brothers and sisters from the North London who wanted you to just lecture them. I think I hope you will take some burden on your shoulders in helping your own
absolutely. I mean,
brothers and
education
sisters.
is always good, and believers should be reminders to one another. And remember, I hope that people who are listening who are Muslims recognize that I haven't told you anything new. I am just trying to remind you of what you already know, and to remind you that even in this difficulty, the guidance you already have is the great guidance. And where you seek other help, seek that with the knowledge that you have asked Allah first, and that you are trying to access any other help He gives you, in His name. And where we can be reminders to one another, that is always a privilege, and I'd be very happy to help.
I would like to say, the viewers, thank you very much for watching this wonderful program. It has been a very useful evening, and I thank Dr. Green Thompson for giving us the opportunity to come to Kalsan TV and do this lecture. I would like to remind everyone that the doctor has voluntarily agreed to go as many places as he can, and to lecture his brothers and sisters in mosques, Islamic centers, and community venues, wherever he can. I think free of charge, expecting a reward not from people but from Allah. So we will update you about the forthcoming events. It is, I think you will agree with me that to have a Muslim psychiatrist in front of us and addressing most common problems, I believe this is a very, very difficult topic. Many of our brothers and sisters are going through, and we pray to Allah that He brings solutions to the problems of people have.
We thank Allah in all conditions, and I'd like to make a personal mention of a colleague of mine who asked me to speak in a masjid about this for the first time.
Yeah.
My Turkish brother Emre Kadim, whose family's education foundation, the Olive Tree Education Foundation, encouraged me to speak in masajid in Al Manar in West London, in the Rumi Masjid in North London, and what it shows us is that Muslim communities everywhere are suffering from this, and what is important is that people don't suffer alone, that they don't feel that this is a punishment, and that
to them individually.
Yes, absolutely, and that they are weak in faith, and therefore that there's no hope. Because what some people can do in trying to help their brother or sister is say your iman is weak, be close to Allah, and you may inadvertently push them away from the masjid, push them away from the faith, because they think I'm a bad person and there's no hope. So let's not do that to anyone.
Well, thank you very much. walaalayaal waa mahadsantihiin. waxaan soo gaarnay dhammaadka barnaamijka. waxaa cawada sidaan idiin sheegnay martino ahaay Dr. Green Thompson oo دكتور سو ku takhasusay cudurrada dhimirka amba cudurrada maskaxda gala waxyaabaha cawada khaasatan waxa laga hadlay mowduuca depressionka iyo noocyadiisa kala duwan dhakhtarku wuxuu si gooni walaalaha ugu dhiirigeliyaa in ay ilaah ay markasta ku xirnaadaan oo diintooda ay macna noqdaan kuwa ku camal fala wuxuu aaminsan yahay asaga iyo dhakhaatiir kale oo muslimiina in maaragtay annaga oo aaminna in waxaan ay ahaayeen imtixaan ilaahay dhinacii uga yimid qofku hadduu ku dhago diintiisa oo aamino inuu ka baxayo inuu ka bixi karo taasoo ka muhiimsan daawada. waa mahadsantihiin insha allah waxaan rajaynaynaa barnaamijka inaad ka faa'iidaysataan. sidaa idiin ballan qaadna dhakhtarku waxa uu samayn doonaa muxaadarooyin ka samayn doonaa masaajida badan iyo islamic centers. waxaana tegi doonaa magaalooyinka Leicester, North London, waana idinla socodsiin doonaa. aad iyo aad ayaad u mahadsantihiin. وجزاكم الله خيرا. Thank you very much, Doctor.